Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Chof in Avodah as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sun Masar V'Shivya. The end of the mission at the bottom of your Testament base said yesterday that you're not allowed to sell a goy. You're not allowed to sell to a goy in Eretz Yisrael something that's attached to the ground, like a tree or produce, as we'll see. Ein mochen, said the Mishnah, 2 lines from the bottom of your Testament base. Ein mochen mechuber lekarka. You can't sell them. You're not allowed to sell them anything attached to the ground. The Gemara will explain why. But from the time, if you cut it off, let's say you fell the tree or you cut off some produce, then you could sell them because then it's no longer attached to the ground. What's the reason? What's the difference for it? We'll see. Rav Yehuda Mocher al manas liktos. Rav Yehuda is more makel than Rav Meir. The Tanakh presumes Rav Meir. We'll see in the Gemara. Rav Yehuda says that you're allowed to sell to him on the condition that he's going to cut it off. Now, you're trusting him in some way, but we'll see. It depends on the circumstances. The Gemara will talk about that at the end of today's talk. Says the Gemara at the last line on your Testament base. How do we know this idea that you're not allowed to sell them something attached to the ground? The pasuk says lo schanem. Now, lo schanem is an interesting word. It means chinam, for nothing. Don't give them gifts, right? That's the old idea. Don't give them a gift for nothing. Don't befriend them. But it also means lo sitam chaniya bakarka. Don't give them an encampment, or don't let them park, or maybe a better word is don't let them settle in the land. Don't give them a settlement here. We don't want the goyim to take over Eretz Yisrael. Los Chonim. We always had that issue in America. You're allowed to give your postman a Christmas gift. You remember that? Yeah. You know, there, you're not giving to him for nothing. You give it to him so he should deliver your mail. Everybody else is giving him something. You don't give it to him
to your house.
That's right. Otherwise, he'll go to right. Exactly. He'll throw it out. So you want him to deliver it. That's different. So here the idea is. He's saying that this is an additional idea, as we'll see. Los Chanim here means don't give them an encampment, a settlement in the ground. That means that you can't give them something attached to the ground. It means they have something in the ground. Says Gemara, "Hi Los Chanim boile lahachik kamrachmana." No, Los Chanim means is used for a different reason. Los Chanim lo titaim chen. Don't give them grace. You shouldn't say, "Oh, look how good looking that guy looks," or that shiksa looks out how good they look. That's what Los Chanim. Don't give them grace. So then came lemakra lo sechunem. If it would only be for grace, it would say lo sechunem. My lo sechanem, the lotion of lo sechanem. The reason it says it in that form is to tell you not only can you not give them grace, but also you cannot let them settle the ground. Shema min atachi. You see 2 things from there. Both grace. Don't say how nice they look. Don't make them graceful. Nor don't give them settlement in the ground. We still have a different drasha. The pasuk is don't give him anything for nothing, like we said. Don't give your postman, or don't just befriend a goy and give him free gifts. Again, if you're getting something in return, that's different. You're giving him a premium, or you're giving him a loss lead, or you're giving him some sort of something in order to entice him to buy from you or to give you some service. That's not free. Here we're talking about don't give him something free. So los chanim is lashon of chinam. Again, im kelam recall los sechinam. If it would only be for that, the pasuk could say lo techinam, meaning lo techinam, don't give them something for free. And if it were meant to say chen, it would lo techuneim, don't give them grace, don't say how nice they look. But the fact that it says my lo sechaneim, the fact that it gives you this strange lotion of lo sechaneim, shma mina kulu, you see all 3 things from here. Number 1, you can't give them anything for free. Number 2, don't let them find grace. And number 3, don't give them a settlement in the ground. We see it in the price as well. All 3 ideas. Don't give them a settlement. We're talking about in Eretz Yisrael. In the next mission, in tomorrow's daf, we'll see about are you allowed to sell them land in Chutz La'aretz. So here we're talking about in Eretz Yisrael. Don't give them settlement in the land. Don't show them grace. Don't say how nice they look. The bracha, 3rd thing, don't give anything for free. It says gufa, giving them something for free itself. Tano is a machlokas tanam. Can you give them something for free or not? And we just said you cannot, but that's really a machlokas, as we'll see. The Tanya. The famous pasuk says, do not eat an avela. What is an avela? An avela is an animal that died without shchita, right? Even if it's a kosher animal like a cow, a goat, or a sheep. A kosher animal or a deer that's kosher, still you cannot eat unless you had shchita. What should you do with the Evan Avela? You know, it happens very often, even in a kosher badatz shlachtos, they make a mistake and they have an avela. So what do? They give it to the goyim, right? So what do you do with an avela? Like ger shebesherechet, now to give it to the ger. Here we mean a ger toshav. We don't mean a ger tzedek. A ger tzedek is a full Jew. We mean a ger toshav, a ger who's a goy who lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's accepted upon himself to keep the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So he's allowed to live with you. If he lives willing to live in peace, you can let him stay in the land. That's called a ger toshav, not an avodah zarah. Avodah zarah obviously did not accept the Zayin mitzvahs b'nei Noach, but this is a ger toshav. You can give it to him, vachola, and let him eat it. O machor lanachri, or sell it to a guy. Notice he doesn't say give it to a guy. He says either give it to a ger toshav or sell it to a guy. The way it says okay, either give it to a ger toshav, or sell it to a guy. Like ger b'mechira. Now, how do I know I could sell it to a ger toshav if I so choose? Talmud lomar. Look at the way the pasuk reads. It says like ger asher b'sharecha titnena o machor lanachri. If you put the comma after o machor, you could say like ger asher b'sharecha titnena o machor. Either give it to him or sell it to him if you so choose. Right, so it says that you could do both. You can give a ger, you can either give it to him or sell it to him. How do I know that I could give it to a guy, to an avodah zarah? This is the one who argues what we just said, that he doesn't darshan lo schanim and don't give him a free gift. You could give a guy a free gift. Just give it to him. Talmud lomar, again, put the comma earlier. Like ger asher b'sharecha, stop. Then put down titnena va'achala o machar lanachri. You attach the titnena v'achala or machar to the guy. The guy, not only can you sell it to him, you can also give it to him. Nimtzat omer, there's a way how you read it. Nimtzat echad ger, whether he's a ger toshav or a guy or a kachavim, bain or an akum, bain benasina ben mechir v'divrei Meir. Meir says you could either give it to him or sell it to him. Notice, because if it really meant to say no to a ger toshav, you can give it, not sell it. To a guy, you can only sell it, you cannot give it. So Rashi points out that Rashi a little bit past halfway down on the page. Right? And goes on to say, Rashi goes on, if it means to say what? You can't give it to a guy, you must sell it to him. It should have been very clear. The pasuk should have said, Titnena va'achala lager asher b'sharecha. Give it and let him eat it. Let the ger toshav asher b'sharecha. So the asher b'sharecha separates them. So you just can't move around the comma. But it would say, if it would say lager asher b'sharecha, lager titnena va'achala titnena. Then what do you do with an avela? Right? Lo sochlu kol nevela. It should say lager titnena va'achala asher b'sharecha. Right? Then it's very clear that to the ger you can only give it, and to the ger guy you can only sell it. You can't say then that the giving is going on the guy, because you put the words asher b'sharecha in between giving it to the ger toshav and selling it to the guy. That would be very clear, but it doesn't say it that way. It says like so you can interpret it like either give it to the ger or sell it to the ger, or you could say titnena ba'achala o machor lenachri. To the guy, you could also either give it or sell it. That's how Rav Meir learns. So Rav Meir may agree that Los Chanem teaches me you cannot give them an encampment, don't sell them land or anything attached to the land in Eretz Yisrael, as well as don't find them in favor, don't give them favor, don't give them grace to say, look how nice this guy looks or whatever. But as far as giving him something, you could give him a free gift, as we see, like as well as titnena v'achala o machor lenachri. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Dvarim kiksavim. You have to read the pasuk exactly the way it reads without trying to move the comma around. Right? Lager benasina says lager sheb'sharecha titnena, period. O machor lenachri, or sell to mechira. Right. So that's how Rav Meir learns. It says Rav Shapiro Rav Meir. Rav Meir has a good answer for Rabbi Yehuda. You should be able to do both, since it doesn't put the words asher b'sharecha between ger and goy. It's mashma that actually you could do both. You could either give it or sell it to the ger, or you could give it or sell it to the goy. Rav Meir, if it would be like Rav Meir says, the way you could do both. Let the pasuk say, give it, let him eat it, and sell it all together, and it can go either on ger or on the goy. Oh, Lamali, why does it say like ger shabashirachatnena? Right? What is the O for? Oh, is it telling me this or that? Either give it to the ger or sell it to the guy. That's how Rav Yehuda will learn. Rav Meir simply telling you, why does it say O? To tell you that it's better to give it to the ger toshav than to sell it to the guy. If you have a choice, Rav Meir, the ger. If you have both, if there's no ger toshav to give it to, okay, then you can sell to the guy. But if you have a choice, there's a ger toshav you can give it to or sell to the guy. That's what you should do. Rabbi Yehuda, kiven the gerat hamatzuva lachyoso. Since the ger toshav, you're mechuyev. If he lives among you and he's accepted the zayin mitzvahs ma'noach, you're mechuyev to give him social. You're mechuyev to give him social welfare, support him. But you're not mechuyev to save and to sustain a goy. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that if it's a choice of giving it to the ger toshav or selling to the guy, obviously you should give it to the ger toshav first. I don't need a pasuk for that. Why does it say O? The reason it says O is to tell me that they're two separate things. You can either give it to the ger or sell it to the guy, but you may not give it to the guy because that's also because of los chane. So he said los chane means three things: don't give it to him, don't have them find grace in your eyes, don't say something nice about them that they look nice. And also, don't sell them. Sell them land in Eretz Yisrael. Anything attached to the land is like the land. This is a proof to what Rav says. Look how pretty this shiksa looks. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't just say, "Oh, look how pretty they look." Don't find them grace. Keep your distance from them. Don't say something like that. Meisvei. Now we ask a kasha where we see where rabbis did say something nice, or that this particular goy or shiksa looks nice. Meisvei, Ma'aseh Shmuel Shaya al Gabe Mala Barabayas. He was once on a step on the Temple Mount, and he saw a shiksa, Noah Bioser, very beautiful shiksa. Omar, he said, Ma'rabu Masechu Hashem. How great are your masim? And as you see something nice, like if you see nice mountains, beautiful sights, you see the Atlantic Ocean, you see some beautiful thing, you're supposed to praise God. So here he did say something nice about the shiksa. That's number one. Shmuel seems to go against Rav's memra that you shouldn't say something how nice goyim look. The Afar Bekiva, famous story of Bekiva, Ra Ashes Tunis Rupus Russia. He saw the wife of the governor in Eretz Yisrael, Tunis Rupus, the evil, the wicked. And when he saw her, he did three things. Rak, he spat. Sochak, he laughed. Ubochan, he cried. Three things, seemingly incongruous, right? He spat, he laughed, and he cried. Rak, why did he spit? Because she came from a rotten drop, meaning she came from goyim. She came from putrefied sperm, so to speak, in a symbolic way, that they're not from a holy Jewish sperm. Sochak, he was laughed, Asida Megaira, because he knew he was able to see the future, and he knew. Why did he laugh? Because he said she's going to eventually convert to Judaism. Vanessa, he's going to marry her. Rabbi Akiva himself, who came from converts, saw that she was going to convert. When you convert, the Torah is matayir the person, like he's a full Jew. Dasida Megayer B'Nosafah, that he's going to marry her. So number one, he spat because she came from a rotten sperm, let's say, rotten eggs and sperm. He laughed because he knew he was going to marry her eventually after she was going to convert. Bacha, he cried, the high shufra boliafra, because this beauty will eventually be consumed by the dirt. In other words, will eventually rot in the dirt. He says, what a shame that eventually she's going to die. That's what he did, three things. But the point is, you see, that Rabbi Akiva laughed, and that he was, happy how she was so beautiful, and then he laughed. He says, "Wow, she's going to be my wife eventually." So you see, that both Rav Shimon and Rav Akiva said something nice about a shiksa. But Rav, how will Rav deal with that? Rav said you're not allowed to say how nice the shiksa looks. Oh, do Yehuda Kamoda? He was simply thanking God. Amar Mar, Roa Bria Stofis. If you see beautiful animals, Omer Baruch Shekacha Bara Ba'olamo. You say Baruch Shekacha Ba'olamo, that Hashem made beautiful things in this world. He was praising God. He was not saying just something nice. Oh, look how nice they look. But he was doing it he was for the purpose of praising God. Okay, so there you're allowed to. You're not allowed to say, look how nice they look. But if you did it for praising God, then it's okay. It says, but you're not supposed to look at them anyway. Are you allowed to look at a woman? You're not supposed to look at women. You should guard yourself from anything evil. So a person should not look at a person, should not gaze at a beautiful woman, even if she's unmarried. She shouldn't look at a married woman, even if she's ugly. A married woman, certainly a person should not look at. And on a base now, nor should he look at a woman's beautiful clothes, like colored clothing, if they belong to a woman, because he sees the clothing and he starts having in mind impure thoughts about the woman. Not only that, he should not look should not look at animals, whether it's a donkey and a female donkey, or a chazira, a pig and a sow, not even birds, shouldn't look at animals when they mate. Even if he's full of eyes, who has many eyes, so to speak, that he can't stop looking, he should restrain himself from looking at beautiful women, period. Person shouldn't look at any women, married, unmarried, Jewish, not Jewish. You're not supposed to look at women, period. Shouldn't look even at animals when they mate, because it might lead to impure thoughts. They said about the Malchamavas, the angel of Death, Shakula Malaynayim. It's full of eyes. He has many, many eyes. When a sick person is on his deathbed, the Malchamavas stands there on top of his head, with a drawn sword, and on the sword he's got like a drop of poison or gall or something bitter. So once the sick person sees the Malach HaMavos coming to get him, is Dazeah, he trembles, and out of fear, out of fright, he opens his mouth like in fright, and the Malach HaMavos throws into his mouth this poison. Mimena mace, from that he dies. Mimena masriach, from that he gets putrefied. He gets decomposed. Mimena panamrikas, his face turns colors as well. The point, though, of all this is that you're not supposed to look at women. It's one thing to say, that you're allowed to say something nice about goyim, just like you could say something nice about animals or mountains or oceans, something nice praising God. But the problem is you're not supposed to look at women, period. Forget about whether you're praising a goy or not. You're not supposed to look at women. Karen's Abbas Savoy. The answer is it was a corner, it was unavoidable. If he sees women coming, he's supposed to look the other way. You're not supposed to gaze at the women. However, this happened was that he was coming from one street and she was coming from another street and just ran into the corner. He didn't have time to avert his eyes. Yeah. It's in the basin. No, it was on Har Bias, right? On Har Bias, yeah. It was some place. Yeah, huh?
The steps go.
The steps, yeah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't mean the 15 steps going from Ezras Nashim to Ezras. He means on Har Bias, Okay. Below big day seven shalisha. So you're not supposed to look. We're going into this idea not to look at women's clothing. Even if they're hanging out on the clothesline, or on the wall, wherever they hang them. Not only if she's not supposed to look at the women's clothing while she's dressed in them, but even if they're just hanging out to dry. Amra Papa over Makabalan, it's only if he knows who it is. In other words, it doesn't mean that if you walk into a store that's selling clothes, you can't look at those clothes because it doesn't lead to any impure thoughts. You're talking about when you know that this dress belongs to this particular woman, you recognize them. Then you look at the clothing, you'll think of the woman. It doesn't say stam doesn't say don't look at colored clothing. If it's not, if it's just in the window or on a mannequin or something like that, doesn't belong to a woman, then it's not prohibited. Shmamina. Amar Chisda. That's only clothing that have been used already. Again, old clothing. If it's a new clothing, like you say, like it's sitting on a mannequin or it's on a hanger, like lesson, but there's no concern because you're not going to be. That won't lead to impure thoughts. If you don't say that, Anan. Mana lashpure. How do we give new clothing to a tailor or to a dry cleaner who's going to clean them, he's going to look at the clothing too. If you say that clothing itself, you can't look at women's clothing, how is a tailor or a seamstress or a dry cleaner supposed to deal with it? He's looking at the clothing. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's not a kasha. Rabbi Yehuda says that min b'mino mutar la'achdus mikol sheferes. And obviously, you're not allowed to mate different species. But let's say you're a farmer, and many times the animals of the same species need help in mating. You're allowed to. You're actually allowed to take the male organ and stick it into the woman. You're allowed to. How are you allowed to do that? You're looking. We just said before, you're not supposed to see animals when they mate. How is a farmer supposed to help his animals mate? So if you're asking that, how did a dry cleaner or a tailor deal with the new clothing? You say, well, that's only by old clothing, by new clothing not. Otherwise, how is a tailor supposed to do? Well, how is a farmer supposed to mate his animals if they need help? The answer is he's occupied with his trade. That's not a kasha. In other words, even if you were to say that new clothing that belonged to a person, right, the new clothing would be usher, it's different when you come to a tradesman, whether it be a dry cleaner or a tailor or a seamstress or a farmer, because they're occupied with their work. They're not thinking about that. That's different. But in any case, it could very well be that it's not, you can't prove it. Could very well be that new clothing is not usher, but it's not because how else would you give a tailor or a fuller, a dry cleaner to clean? Obviously, they're looking at it because that's different when they're occupied with their trade. Mar. Mimenames, you said that the Malach HaMavos, when he kills somebody, how does he kill them? He kills them by dropping a drop of poison down their throats, and from that they die. Name a plea. Rav Shmuel this disagrees with Shmuel's father. Dam Rav Shmuel. He once spoke to the Malach HaMavos. This was the madrega that these people were on. His elo the chashina liyakar de brayse. If I wouldn't be concerned about the honor of people, that it would be, if I wouldn't be concerned about their honor, that I don't want them to be, so to speak, in a state where it looks despicable and repulsive. Have a piranha basis shchita gebehema. I would slaughter their, at the throat, I would cut open their throats like you shecht an animal. So obviously, he cuts their throats. It's not simply a drop of poison. It's still maybe that drop actually cuts it internally, right? And cuts the simanim inside. Obviously, that's not the way most people don't necessarily die that way, right? When they're on their deathbed, they don't die by having their throats cut. But he says, I would do that if I wouldn't be concerned about their that it's despicable to have a man have his throat cut open, to slit his throat. If it wouldn't be that I would be concerned, I would do that. But how does he do that if he's not using a knife to actually kill them, but he's doing it by some poison where it's not evident that his body has been destroyed and cut open? I would do it that way. The answer is you could say that he could do that. He could cut it. He can use a poison to actually, cut the throat open. He doesn't do it because it's not proper. It wouldn't be honorable for a man to have that happen to him. From there, the body decomposes. It's a proof of they said in the yeshiva, if a person wants his body not to putrefy, not to decompose, you have turn it over on his face. In other words, turn the body over so that the Malach HaMavos cannot drop it down his throat. Okay. Obviously, they don't all die that way. Tanabanim. V'nishmar to be called avara. Again, the pasuk says, quoted that pasuk on Aleph. Be careful, guard yourself from any evil thing. A person should not have impure sexual thoughts during the day, so that he shouldn't come to defile himself at night, to be impure at night. Nikan Pinchas Mior, famous Pinchas Mior said this famous line, finds in the Avos, then other places, Torah, if a person who studies Torah, mevi ali de sehirus. If a person studies Torah, that brings him to being careful. Zahirus is zahir, to be careful, to be very precise. Rashi says, Al-Yadesha Osikba in Torah, Rashi did Maskal Torah says, Al-Yadesha Osikba, since he studies Torah, Sharo, Maven, as Horashaba, he understands the prohibitions So Benishma, he's very careful. By studying Torah, that brings him to be careful. He knows what he's supposed to avoid. So here's his reasons. If he's careful, that brings him to zeal, to be very proactive, so to speak. So because he knows what he shouldn't do, he's more careful to zealously zealously prevent himself from not coming to not having any impure thoughts. So the Torah teaches him to be zor, to be precise, to be careful, to avoid things. Zirus brings him to zrizis, to zeal, to be very proactive, to be full of encouragement, to do things carefully. Zrizus mavil denekiyas brings him to nekiyas. What do we mean by cleanliness here? Doesn't mean physical cleanliness. Rashi says nekiyas naki be'ein chet. Zahirus is kshaveir b'liad azar lishamik kef shloi koshaba. Right. So Rashi quotes my love the zor v'lo naga. Look, the zor is kodim. In other words, a zor is a person who's so careful that doesn't even come to, once he knows the Yisr in the Torah, what he shouldn't do, he's so careful that he doesn't even come near there. He doesn't come to approach that kind of activity. In other words, he doesn't have to say, I'm going to avoid it right now. He's so close that he doesn't even go there at all. In other words, he does it with great diligence and motivation. That's what Zriza says. And if he's Zoras in that, that'll bring him to not to sin. That's Nikias, to be clean without sin. Nikias Mavil Precious. And if he's very clean without sin, that brings him to total restraint. Rashi says, Precious, Afmidavar mutter porish. Even things that are mutter to him, he doesn't do that either. Total restraint. Precious if he does that. If he avoids things even which are mutter to do, but he wants to be so careful that he's not even doing that. That brings him to Tahara, which is purity, which is total purity. Even more than clean without sin, he's totally pure. The gear says Kedusha brings him to holiness. Holiness, the Kedusha brings him to humility. Another Yiras brings him to fear of sin. Yiras Lidei, here the gear says Chasidus brings him to piety. And piety, Chasidus Mavil Lidei Ruach Kodesh brings him to have the Holy Spirit on himself, that he has the Holy Spirit on him. Ruach Kodesh Mavil Tchias Mason brings him to the ability to resurrect the dead. Chasidus Gedol Mikul, and the greatest of all of them is piety. Shnemar Ozdi Barta B'Chazon. Then you spoke in a vision L'Chasidecha, as if to say those are the greatest people. Doesn't say Liyarecha. Doesn't say to those who fear you, or to those who are humble, but it says to those who are pious, as if to say the greatest midah is being a chassid. Not when we mean today's chassidus versus masnagim, we mean real piety. This is Rav Shimon Levi, because he said, the greatest attribute, the greatest characteristic that a person have is humility. Shnemar, Ruach Hashem Elokim Alai. God's spirit was upon me. Yan Mashach Hashem Osi, because God drew me Levaser Anovim to speak to give news, to tell the humble ones, to pass the message on to the humble ones. Chasim Lonim, it doesn't say to the pious ones, Elanovim, but rather to the humble ones. This teaches you that humility is greater than all of them. Rashi Tosafos says over here, Chasim Lonim Elanovim. I'm talking about Ksiv Nami Ozi, what does he do with the other pasuk? Yeshlomar Hasim Chasidim Ksiv V'Kolshkein Up. It could be that Chasidim are great. Hashem spoke in person, but nothing could even be greater. Avlin Basura Sagula. We hear you talk about Hashem drew me to give the good news about the redemption. Shita, that Tola Osam B'Chashuvim Ugdol Yoser, that they are even greater. In other words, there's no greater characteristic than to be humble. Being humble does not mean that you put yourself down. It just means that even if you know what your abilities are, if Hashem gave you abilities, you should use those abilities. But even knowing what your abilities are, you still realize that you are nothing. Like Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest of all men, yet he was also the most humble of all people. Ein mocham. So the Mishnah said at the end that we don't sell them anything that's attached to the ground, like trees. But you could sell them after the tree has been felled, after it's been chopped down. Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell them on the condition that they're going to do it. Now we have this machlokas here between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell the tomb on the condition that they'll cut it down. Rav Meir says you can't sell the tomb unless it's all totally cut off. Here the Brisa expands on that. The code says, Rabbi Yehuda, you could sell them a tree on the condition that it will be cut down, that they'll cut it down, and he'll cut it down. You can only sell them. You could sell them the tree if they're on the condition it's going to be sold, that it's going to be cut down. Rav Meir Omer, don't trust the guy. Ein mochlim ela ktsutza. Presumably, you say, well, if you sell them on the condition that they're going to cut it down and they don't cut it down, presumably the sale is invalid, right? And the sale doesn't take effect. Rabbi Yehuda says it's not just a question of trusting him. He says you can sell him on the condition. If he doesn't fulfill the condition, presumably it won't be a sale. Rav Meir says don't do it unless it's actually cut down. Don't sell to him as while it's attached. That's the issue of los chanim. What about shachas? What about fodder? That's like grain that's not fully grown that you usually feed your animals with. You could sell them that shachas also. Amenas says on the condition that you're going to cut it down. The goes is different again. Rabbi Yehuda says the same thing. You could sell them the fodder on the ground on the condition that it's going to be that they'll cut it down. Again, don't sell them even the fodder unless it's already cut down. Comma. What about standing grain like wheat or barley, whatever that's standing, that's ready to be harvested? He says again, Rabbi Yehuda says the same thing. He says you could sell them the grain on the condition that they will cut it down. Again, Rav Meir says in this case too, don't sell them until it's already cut down. Now, why does Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda have to argue about all three cases? The tree, the fodder, and the standing grain. It's all three. Even if you tell me the case of the tree, there Rav Meir says don't cut it down, don't sell to him unless it's actually cut down. Why? Why will the guy cut it down? He doesn't lose anything by the tree standing there. He'll cut it down when he wants to cut it down. Maybe he doesn't need it this season. But in the other cases, what's the other case? The third case, not the second case of the fodder, but the third case of the standing grain. If you don't cut it down at harvest, it's going to go bad. So he's going to lose out if he leaves it there. Maybe Rav Meir then will be Moed Rabbi Yehuda. You could sell to him on the condition that he's going to cut it down, because if he doesn't cut it down, he's going to lose. It's going to be his own loss. So maybe he should be Moed then. You could cut it down you could sell to him on the condition he's going to cut it down, because he has to cut it down, otherwise he's going to lose it. Kamash will know. Rav Meir still stands his ground and says, if it's not cut down, don't sell to him. You tell me those schemes, you don't really see you don't see the gain, the profit that you'll have by leaving it there. Meaning, in the case of the standing grain, of course, it's obvious if you leave it there too long, it's going to go bad. In the case of the tree, if it stays there another year or two, you don't really see the advantage. So maybe in those cases, there Rabbi Yehuda will say what that you could sell to him on the condition that he's going to cut it down, because what's the advantage for him to leaving it there? Certainly in the case of the standing grain, there's no advantage, it's going to go bad. In the case of the tree also, what does he gain by not cutting it down now? But in the case of the fodder, which it's clear that if he leaves it there, it's going to stay there. And maybe he's Moed Rabbi Yehuda. Don't sell to him unless he cuts it down, because in the case of the fodder, the guy who's buying it gains by leaving it there. In the case of the tree, what does he gain? Tree's there before another year. What's the difference? Another ring? It doesn't make much difference. And if it's standing grain, for sure he's going to lose out. But in the case of fodder, maybe he should be Moed Rabbi Yehuda. You can't sell to him unless he cuts it down, unless it's already cut down. And if you tell me the case of fodder, maybe that's where Meir says, what? Don't cut it down. Don't sell to him unless he cuts it down first, because he's going to gain by leaving it. But in the case of the tree, and the case of the standing grain, where maybe it's Moed Rabbi Yehuda, you could sell to him on the condition he's going to cut it down, because he doesn't really have an advantage of leaving it there. Therefore, he tells me in all three cases. Now, we learned before that in case of small animals, remember the Mishnah said, depends on the minig, amakom. There's no concern about, you could sell them small animals. What about the fact that of Ovdei Avodah Zarah are suspected of bestiality? Well, not on their own animals, only on your animal. Don't leave your animal. Don't let him babysit your animal. But his own animals, he's not gonna hurt his own animals. But in the case of large animals, you cannot sell them large animals. Remember, we had why? For the concern that maybe you'll come to lend him your animal and he'll work for him on Shabbos. Either lend him or rent him, or you'll show him how to use the animal, and it'll come out on Shabbos, however, right? But if you sell him an animal, we had before, if you sell him an animal, even a large animal for shechita, right? You sell it to him at the slaughterhouse, then you're allowed to. So you boil it. What about the hema al menas lishchot now? What about an animal that it's going to be used for slaughtering, but he hasn't slaughtered it yet? Are you allowed to? What would they say there, Mao? Would you say the same machlokas? Hasam time in my shar Rabbi why do Rabbi say you're allowed to sell it to him? If what? On the condition that he's going to cut it down, the labushusekam, it's not in the guy's rishus. You have a land here, you have a farm, you have trees, you have standing wheat, you have fodder growing. It's your land. You're selling him the tree for the wood. You're selling him the grain that he can cut it down, but it's your land. So there you could be rest assured, if you're selling him on the condition, if he doesn't fulfill the condition, you could take it back. It's your land, it's your property. So what would Rav Yehuda say in the case of an animal that you're selling it to him on the condition that he's going to slaughter it? Again, if it's not going to be for slaughter but for work, you're not allowed to sell him a large animal, right? So what would you say over here? It's not in the guy's rishus. The tree, the fodder, the standing grain is on your land. You can't just leave it there. You can't leave it because you're going to protest. But an animal, keep it the rishus. Once you sell it to him, it's in his rishus. Mashali, maybe he'll leave it and he won't slaughter it right away. And then you have a problem if he actually uses it for farming. Then you have a problem. Like we said, maybe he'll come to use your animal on Shabbos. The example that the rabbis made, that maybe he'll use your animal on Shabbos. There is no difference between that. Even Rabbi Yehuda would be. Do we say that they're in the case of land by selling him produce or trees? It's on your land, so you won't allow him to leave it there indefinitely. But an animal, once he buys it from you, he takes it home. And there he may leave it. And maybe Rabbi Yehuda would be motivated that you cannot sell to him unless it's actually slaughtered, unless it's already in the meat stage. So what would Rabbi Yehuda say in Tashma? We see the same machlokas. The Tanya behema almanas lishchot v'shochet. You could sell him an animal on the condition that he's going to shecht it, and he'll shecht it. Did Rabbi Yehuda, so you could rely that he'll fulfill his word. I mean, otherwise you could take him to court, I guess, if he doesn't do it. Rav Meir Omer emach mashchutza. So we see the same machlokas we have by land. Is the same machlok, land and produce on land, same machloks Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell to him on the condition that he's going to shecht it, just like on the condition that he's going to cut the tree down, cut the produce down. Rav Meir says don't sell to him unless it's actually slaughtered already. If it's not slaughtered already, you have to be concerned that he's going to use it for farming. And then we come into the Gzeira Drabanan that the rabbi said don't sell him animals because you may come to lend him or rent him your animal and use it on Shabbos, or as you show him how to test drive the animal, it may be Erev Shabbos, and your animal may come to do work on Shabbos, and you're over on the Chamer, which is driving your animal on Shabbos, which is an Isser Doraisa, and according to some machlokas, some say it's even Chayev Chatos, less like any other Belacha on Shabbos. All right, we'll pick it up from the Mishnah tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day, everybody. Kol Tov.
Beautiful.